if you guys have had the same problem that I have, but I have this addiction to looking at Goodreads reviews when I'm at a bookstore book shopping. If there is a book that I see that I like, I make sure automatically to go to Goodreads and check the reviews before I actually consider buying it. It's a problem, and I have now landed myself in a reading slump despite looking at all these Goodreads reviews. So I decided to do something completely bonkers, something that I haven't done since I was younger, and I blindly grabbed books just solely based off the cover. And I also thought that it would be fun to not read the synopsis, not look up any Goodreads reviews, obviously, and then come home and guess what they're about. So let's go ahead and get started. Let's go book shopping to the bookstore. We are here at the bookstore, outside the bookstore, and we're going to go in and I'm going to go ahead and look at these book covers and see what catches my eye. Not look up the synopsis, not look up the Goodreads reviews. The only thing that I can check is to make sure that it's like a first book, and there's like a completely different website that I can do for that. I'm really nervous, but I'm really kind of excited because I'm tired of basing all my opinions based off of other people's Goodreads reviews. So this is going to be fun, and I hope that this helps me overcome my reading slump, because my reading slump is pretty bad. It's pretty bad. Okay, let's go. Okay, so we are back. I have my books here, and I'm going to show you the books that I ended up getting, and as well as my synopsis that I made with my own words. These aren't the actual synopsis. I'm just guessing what these books are about. All I know is the name of the book and what I see on the cover. And then some of them I know because they were like in certain sections, like the fantasy section and all that. So let me grab the first book. So the first book that I grabbed is called Among Thieves by M.J. Kun. I did check to make sure that it is the beginning of a series, but I checked a website that doesn't show me any reviews at all. So this is the first book in the series. I made sure of that. Like I said, obviously this was in the fantasy section, so I know it's a fantasy book. This gives me very much like Throne of Glass, Selena Sardathian vibes, so I'm gonna go with that synopsis. I'm gonna go with, this is a woman, but I think she's a thief, obviously. It's called Among Thieves. So I think she's a infamous thief, and she steals things. She's kind of like Robin Hood, but she has her own little like clique that she like vibes with, you know, and then she probably steals from the wrong person, or maybe she gets this really big rep that she steals and some higher up person wants her to steal something impossible. Obviously, because she's a badass, she can do it. So that's my estimated guess for Among Thieves by M.J. Kun, and I'm excited to read this one. This was the one that, this is a cover that like drew me the most. I'm excited for this one. The next book that I picked up is called Hall of Smoke, The is Divine by H.M. Long, and it looks like this. This one, again, we have, I'm assuming this looks like a female with another axe or a hatchet. These seem to be like the weapon of choices for fantasy novels, or they're just, they happen to be the weapons that catch my attention for some reason. So for this one, I'm going to assume that this is, again, I feel like this woman is going to be a warrior. I feel like she's going to have some sort of mystical powers tied to owls. Maybe she's an ascendant of Athena. I don't know. I'm assuming she's an ascendant of Athena, or she's somehow tied to Athena the goddess, because Athena the goddess she helped people like on adventures or stuff. So I think she's somehow going to be tied to all that, and she's going to have some sort of ability that Athena gives her. Kind of like Kratos, but like female. Maybe something horrendous does happen to her in her past, but do you get what I mean? That's my estimated synopsis for this. We will see in the end too if I'm right at the end of the reading vlogs. The next book that I got was The Paleontologist by Luc Dumas. This was in the thrillers section, and it did have a little thing that said like The Shining mixed with Jurassic Park or something like that, and that's what intrigued me. So I'm assuming this is about a paleontologist that maybe gets stuck in a museum. I'm gonna assume that he gets stuck in a museum or somewhere where there's like dinosaurs, but he's alone. So he starts to go crazy, like in The Shining, and he starts to think that the dinosaurs are real. That's what I think. That's my guess for The Paleontologist. I don't know how close I am to it. Again, but I'm really excited for this one. I haven't read a thriller in a while, but this one just, come on, it intrigues me. It intrigues me. And then the last book that I got was this one, The Three Body Problem by Cixin Liu. So this one, honestly, I guess I had it on my Goodreads, but it's probably been there for years because, to be honest, I thought this was a nonfiction. I thought this was a nonfiction, like, spiritual book that I had on my TBR, and I think I even put it under my spiritual section without even looking up what it's about. But I saw it in, like, the fantasy sci-fi section, so I'm assuming it's not, like, a spiritual nonfiction where we talk about aliens and stuff, but, like, a fictional book where we talk about aliens. What I'm assuming, what I'm guessing, and I wrote a little note here in the beginning of what I think it's going to be about. I'm gonna read you my little note that I wrote. So what I think this is about. It takes place somewhere in Egypt, and then the pyramids turn out to be some huge magnet that floats and sucks up objects controlled by aliens. And the reason why I got that was because the pyramid, you can see the pyramids are like sucking things up, or like making them levitate. I put the aliens are going to start coming to Earth and start taking over their bodies like a host, but there will be 3 people in one body, like 2 aliens, 1 human, which is why it's called the 3-body problem. Somehow science is tied into everything, and I get that from the little intricate science stuff. And this also gives me science vibes, and it's also science fiction. And that's what will save the day. So science is going to save the day. And I also think that some government guy is going to really like shiznit it up. I think this dude right here, I think he's a part of the government, and I think he like accidentally makes this cataclysmic disaster, and he like activates the aliens, or he activates some sort of ancient artifact that activates the aliens, and he regrets it, and that's him being like, oh what'd I do? These are the 4 books that I'm going to be reading, you guys. Stay tuned for my reading vlog following this. And I'm going to actually let my pupsters, you guys are going to see my dog. I have an Old English sheepdog named Nezuko, and she's going to pick my first read from the 2 books that I want to read the most. So these are like my top 2 books that I want to read. So she's going to go ahead and pick. We're going to give her some treats. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. So I'm gonna let my little baby decide which book that I read first. So I got her 2 treats. These are her 2 favorite treats. We got some smoked chicken tenders and some beef recipe rolls. And I'm gonna pick the 2 books that I want to read the most from here. And I'm gonna put her treats on there, and she's going to choose which one I read first, right, Nezzy? Good job. Okay, so here are the 2 books. Okay, Nezuko, go. Come on, come here, come get your treats. Nezzy, come get treats, right here. Alright, so she went straight for that one. Alright, so it looks like the first book that I'll be reading is The 3-Body Problem. Yay! First of all, apologies for the messed up crazy hair, but I have officially gotten to over 100 pages into The 3-Body Problem. In this story, we are basically we're first following like the 1960s, and in the 1960s in China, there are these red guards, and these red guards basically are against theorists and physicists in China,
and all the professors that were teaching Albert Einstein's teachings and all that are basically condemned. And we follow this character named Wenji as she watches her father, who is a physics professor who did teach about Albert Einstein and all his theories, basically get beaten to death by these girls that are a part of the Red Guards. And then she grows up in the labor camps, and she ends up joining the force that basically controls this like satellite. It's like this radar satellite that she notices, and people talk about the fact that every time the satellite opens up, it does things like birds go crazy in the sky. People swear that it controls the weather. Some people say that the people that live really close to it, their hair starts falling off. Like, it's really messing people up tremendously. Then we go to present day, and present day we follow a researcher named Wang from China as well, and he is basically sentenced to with the like CIA and like all these government officials, and he's making these like nanoparticles where he can literally slice things to pieces with little tiny fibers, and basically working on like this collider. And they want him to infiltrate this place called the Frontiers of Science, because a lot of physicists are unaliving themselves after working with these Frontiers of Science people, because they're physicists, so they believe obviously in physics, and they are all writing notes at the end of their life, like when they decide to unalive themselves, basically saying that physics isn't real. None of the laws that we know within science are real, that it's all made up. And it's driving these physicists crazy. So then this main character, Wang, starts taking photos one day, and he develops the photos, and he starts to notice like this little like timer, and the timer keeps going down and down and down, and he starts to go crazy. So he contacts the lady that's a part of the Frontiers of Science, and he's like, what exactly is going on, la la la. And then she's like, oh, your little hydrogen collider, your particle collider, turn it off, like that's all you need to do. And he's like, all right, I'm not playing your games. So he goes to sleep, and the next day he sees the timer still going off in his vision, in like his peripheral vision. So he goes to his job, and he has everybody turn on the particle collider for a few days, and then the timer stops immediately. And then he calls the lady, and then he's like, hey, what exactly is going on? Like, what sort of science are you like working with here? And then he's like, I like stopped playing these little games. I'm going to turn the collider back on. You can do whatever you want to me. It's not going to affect me. Like, are you sure about that? He's like, yeah, if you really want to catch my attention, you're going to have to do something bigger. And then she's like, okay, so then within 3 days from now, your entire universe, as you know it, is going to flicker right before your eyes. And that's where I'm at, okay? And then he goes into like this little video game called 3 Body, and then he just left that game. That's when I got a little bit like, I don't know what the video game has anything to do with it, but come on, like, this just seems so awesome. And I realized that President Obama blurbed it in the back, and that's pretty cool. So yeah, so far so good. I just wanted to let you know. What is wrong with my camera? I just wanted to let you guys know how it's going, and it's going great. So I will be back when I finally finish it to give my final thoughts on this book.
Alright, so we are back, and I am here with a review for The 3 Body Problem by Cixin Liu. So I have read it, as you can see, and I have had a lot to say about this book. So was my synopsis right? Not really, no. It did have to do with extraterrestrials, and it did have to do with like a pyramid, but it didn't take place in Egypt, which I thought it did. So in this story, first we follow the past time, and we follow this main character named Yi Wenji as these Red Guards take over all of science, and basically every physicist and astrophysicist that followed Einstein is basically punished, and she sees her father get unalived right before her eyes, and it basically causes a lot of trauma within her. And then she ends up working as an astrophysicist for the enemy. And her job is to basically try and communicate with extraterrestrial life forms. And then in the present, we follow Wang, and Wang is a nanotech researcher. He basically researches particle colliders, and he's on the verge of making this breakthrough in science with this particle collider that basically slices things very tiny pieces, and it basically requires just a little tiny bit of like nanomaterial. And then Wang ends up getting called to this meeting with the government where they're like, hey, these people called the Frontiers of Science are really interested in your work. Do you know much about them? And Wang is like, no. And they're like, okay, because a lot of physicists are dying, they're unaliving themselves, and we don't know why, but we think that it's tied to these people. And so a lot of physicists are unaliving themselves, and so Wang comes in contact with one of the Frontiers of Science's people. And then he starts to see all these crazy things that don't tie in with physics. For example, he sees the universe blinking at him, and he can see why the physicists went crazy, because if this is happening in their world, that means that the law of physics aren't real. And the physicists who literally study physics, it goes against everything that they believed in, and so it drives them to insanity, and it causes them to unalive themselves. And we see Wang go through this process as well, even though he isn't a physicist, so it doesn't have as heavy of an impact on him. And he is basically tied into this huge like rebellion and conspiracy, and there's so much to it. Like, I don't want to give too much away because a lot unfolds throughout the story, and we don't actually really know what's going on because we're following, everything is unfolding as it unfolds for our main character. So I really enjoyed that about this book, okay? Because I, like, right away, this book like threw you in. And because there was so much going on within just the first few chapters, it took a little bit for me to fully grasp, like, oh, okay, now I get it. But even when I got it, I didn't really get it, because even our main character is confused as to what is going on. And so we're confused with our main character, but not to a point where it's like, what is going on with this book? It's to a point where it's like, what is going on with this world? Okay, and how does that tie into this random video game that our main character Wang finds that a lot of physicists are playing? I just really enjoyed it, and even when the science and the mathematics were being explained, it was told in a way that was very simplified to normal people like me that don't really understand these mathematical and scientific things, you know. It wasn't like a lot of like juggernog, is that a word? That's a drink from Modern Warfare. What am I talking about? Is it juggernog? Anyways, I really enjoyed this story, okay? I liked that things were unfolding for us as it was unfolding for the main character. There was constant jaw-dropping moments, and it was like reveal after reveal that this story never slowed down and it never got boring. I loved the characters. There was this one character in particular named Chi, who at the very beginning, like, you can't stand him. He's very annoying, but he grew on me so much because at the very end of the book, he says this like line that just was mic drop, this like mic drop moment that I was like, oh my gosh, if this was a movie, which it's gonna be a Netflix show that I saw the trailer for already, which looks so good. It's just like one of those lines that are like so iconic. Do you get what I mean? That I'm like, yes, yes, King, do this. Oh my gosh, it was just so good. The writing was amazing. The pacing was amazing. This whole story was just so good. And I also like how it talks about humanity as a whole And I really enjoyed that because there's this paragraph where this man is talking about like, this is the time of mass extinction because humans are making all these scientific breakthroughs so rapidly that we're killing off all these species, and we don't really care that we're doing it. All these species and all these animals are going extinct because we're killing the planet. And it is a time of mass extinction, just not for humans, but for other species. It just talks about all these scientific discoveries that we're making, and it's like, are we really doing it for good, or are we going down the wrong path? And it makes you question humanity as a whole. Like, are we headed in the right direction, or are we slowly just killing ourselves with these atom bombs and all these weapons of mass destruction that we're using these scientific discoveries for, instead of like good things and positive things and things that have positive impact? And I liked that social commentary on us as a species. You realize why the villains turn to the dark side. You see that how they've lost all hope for humanity, and the way that they explain it makes you think like, I can see why you're behind this. Like, I can see your point. It doesn't mean I agree with it, but I can see why they went there, why they went down that path. You know what I mean? And I just felt like it had a lot of really good points. This book did tend to get really dark in certain areas, but it wasn't too dark to the point where it would just devastate you. It was dark enough to the point where it would make you contemplate things, and it would make you contemplate life and how sometimes we feel like we're so insignificant as humans, when in reality, as a whole, we're literally accelerating rapidly. The Netflix show is coming out in March, and the creators of Game of Thrones are the ones that are behind this show, so I know that it's gonna be effing good. Even some of the actors are in this show. March cannot come soon enough. This book was 5 out of 5 stars. I'm so glad for this cover by 5 out of 5 effing stars. And now the next book that I'm going to be reading is The Paleontologist by Luc Damas. So all I know about this one is that it's a cross between The Shining and Jurassic Park, and I'm excited for this one. So let's see how this one goes. All right, hi, hello. So I am 100 pages into The Paleontologist by Luc Dumas. And so far, this book is okay. It's really slow. Like, I wasn't expecting it to be this slow, but the font, like, hello, Rebecca Yarros. Like, this is her font right here. The size, you know what I mean? Like, Rebecca Yarros's writing in, like, Iron Flame and Fourth Wing is, like, known for being super tiny. And we get that with this. So, The Paleontologist, I don't even remember what I said it was about, but I was probably wrong. You know, this is about a guy that he grew up really messed up in like a really messed up home life. His mom sucks. You know, like his mom did not take care of him. She was an addict, and then he had this little sister that he would take care of. And his sanctuary was basically like the museum, specifically like the dinosaur exhibits. He was always very obsessed with dinosaurs. And then his sister goes missing in this museum, and she's just never found. And he gets nightmares about this guy, which he calls the Bone Man. And then years later, he grows up, becomes a paleontologist, and he actually gets a job at that museum that his sister went missing in. And now he feels like he's there, and he's back because his sister is calling him back, and he wants to figure out exactly what happened to his sister when he was young. And it looks like something supernatural might be happening in this museum, because things like he's starting to see things that aren't really there, like these beetles come to life and then he blinks his eyes and they're like gone. And there's this one dinosaur specifically that's like the only carnivore in like the whole museum that drove the previous paleontologist insane, and like actually led him to be laid off just because this dinosaur literally made him crazy. Like, it drove him crazy. He was talking about how the dinosaur is haunting him and this dinosaur is real and moving around, and our main character just found that dinosaur and like just found the archives behind it. And so that's where we're at. It's very slow, like not too much is really happening like at all. Right now it's like looking like a I don't want to say 2.5, like a very low 3, I want to say for me, like a 3.00, not anything over a 3, but that's just how it is right now. I'm hoping that the pacing really picks up, especially like, come on, like we're already 100 pages in and the book's like 300 or so pages. So come on, let's get to the action, please. Let's get to the action, because this promised me clash between Shining and the Jurassic Park, and I'm not getting that at all. Like, I'm getting boringness. Let's pick up the pace here. Hello. Hi. I am here. We are back. And I am here with a full-length review for The Paleontologist by Luc Demas. So we are done. I am finished. I have finished this book. I can tell you now my final thoughts, my final synopsis and review on this. So in this book, I kind of already talked about how it's about like this paleontologist and his sister was lost in this museum, and then he ends up working for this museum. And overall, the first 200 pages or so, I'm not gonna lie, were really slow, and I was struggling. Like, I was struggling really bad. The pacing, I don't know, I just felt like a lot of times, every time something supernatural and like a little bit creepy would happen, all of a sudden our main character just wakes up, Simon just wakes up, and then it's like it was a dream and it never happened. And I feel like that happens so many times, it just sort of becomes so repetitive until finally 200 pages in it starts picking up, and then after that it's completely fast-paced, and I just felt like it became so fast-paced to the point where everything was wrapped up. It was, don't get me wrong, it was wrapped up beautifully. It just was wrapped up a little bit too quick, if that makes any sense. Like, I feel like they could have spent a little bit more time pacing out the end instead of pacing out the beginning, and then it would have been a little bit more of a consistently paced story overall. But overall, I have to admit that I really did enjoy the story. I felt like there was so many things that kept popping up, and I'm like, how are they gonna wrap this up? Are they gonna even answer these questions? And I was like, I don't know how they're gonna do it. And they ended up wrapping it up with a beautiful little bow, a little bit too quickly, but it was still done right. Like, everything was answered. There was no question that was left unanswered. And overall, I just thought it was beautiful. Like, the last line was just so gorgeous. Like, he just says something about like, just like, you know, like life and like how we're all bones, but we have to enjoy life, and life is beautiful. And it was just cute. Like, I don't know, like the ending was just beautiful. It had like this very like bittersweet ending to it. And I felt like if they made like a second book to this, it kind of gave me the feeling that even if this is a standalone, I feel like this could be made into a series, because at the end, even though all the questions are answered, we are still left with a pretty good like premise to what could be a series, if that makes any sense. I really did like it. Okay, I didn't know the Goodreads reviews until I put it in my Goodreads reviews, and then I noticed that this had like a 3.6. And I'm so glad that I didn't read the Goodreads reviews until afterwards, because Goodreads does tend to impact my brain. And if a Goodreads review is bad, it makes me feel like even if I read it, I'm gonna think that it's bad automatically because of the Goodreads reviews. You know, like, I'm easily impressed. I don't know, like, I'm gullible to Goodreads reviews. Does that make any sense? I hope that makes sense. But I'm glad that I didn't look at the Goodreads reviews till the end, because it didn't impact my feelings on it. And I ended up rating it a 4-star because I did like it. I did like it. The pacing could have been a little bit more better planned out and a little bit more I don't know, consistently paced. And the first 200 pages, like, I was ready to DNF it. You guys, I'm not gonna lie, like, I struggled through the first 200 pages. But after that, it did get very fast paced, and I ended up really loving it. And I loved that I learned a lot about paleontology. And my fiance was even asking me questions like about, like, well, how do dinosaur bones? And I'm like, you know what? I can answer that for you. And it was so good. And it made, like, paleontology and, like, bones cool and, like, fun to learn about. Do you know what I mean? Just kind of like what Andy Weir did with, like, Project Hail Mary and, like, making science fun. That's what, like, Luc Demoss did with paleontology in this book. I personally really enjoyed.
Hi. Today, I am updating you on Among Thieves by M.J. Cunn. So I am currently 112 pages into this, and this is great. Oh my gosh. Okay, so we have, now I can explain a little bit what it's about, because now I kind of get the gist of it. In this book, we are following our main character, and our main character is Raya, R-Y-I-A. I'm gonna say Raya. So Raya is our main character, though we do get point of views from other characters as well. Each chapter we're rotating to a different character, but it seems to really be focused on Raya here. And Raya is basically a assassin for this huge criminal lord guy. He's like a huge time criminal, and his name is Callum Clem, and she is a part of this gang, I guess, or like group of criminals called the Saints, and they basically run these streets. And they do have like opposing clans that they're against. So you have the Harpies, and then you have, forgot what the other people are called, but there are two other opposing clans, and we find out that those two other criminal clans are coming together and trying to eliminate the Saints, because that's their main focus, is trying to eliminate the Saints and Callum Clen. And Raya here is basically, she just offers herself up to Callum Clem, and she's like, hey, I'm an assassin, I'm gonna help you out. And she has this very infamous title that everybody knows who she is. Like, if you hear her name is like the Butcher of Carrowwood. If you hear her, Carwick. If you hear her name, like, run, okay? Like, if she is coming for you, like, you know that you are hopeless. Like, she is a very famous assassin. Like, you do not want to mess with her. Nobody, either male or female, want to mess with the Butcher of Carwick. And we follow her as she's trying to spy on this opposing clan and trying to figure out what their plans are. And then we find out that their plans are to go into this man called the Guildmaster, who's pretty much the king of kings. You know, like, there's the kings, and he like surpasses them. He has more power than them, because he is able to control these species called adepts, which are basically humans with like magical gifts. And adepts used to rule the world, but ever since the Guildmaster was able to tame them, he has control over all the adepts. The only downside is that any human that is born an adept, they get taken away from their mother. It doesn't matter if you're royal, it doesn't matter if you're a king. If the Guildmaster will know when a baby is born with adept powers, and he will automatically be taken away from his family. And we find out that Raya specifically is harboring a secret, and she's somehow tied to the Guildmaster. And we find out that the plans behind the Guildmaster and all this is they really want to steal this quill that the that shows basically where all the adepts are in the continent. And Raya really wants to be free from the Guildmaster's grasp because he's able to trace her. So she really wants to get her hands on that quill and destroy it. However, she tells Callum Clem, yeah, you know, they're trying to steal this quill. They're offering them 400,000 crescents, which is a lot of money in their world. And Callum Clem is like, all right, cool. We're going to send you and a group of other thieves to go get that quill. And Raya, nobody knows that Raya has like her own secret little plan, but it looks like the other characters have their own plan for the quill as well. Like they all have their, they're all criminals and they're all thieves, so they all have their little ulterior motives for having the quill. So nobody really wants to give it to Callum Clem. They all have little secret things that they want to do with it behind their, in the back of their minds.
Okay, so we are here with the final review for this book. And overall, I read this so quick. There were times where it was hard to put down because it was so good. Like, I haven't even finished. I stopped marking the tabs, but I need to go back and like mark the tabs because there were so many like good quotes in here that I really loved. This book was just so good. Like, I loved the magic system behind it. I loved our characters. I loved how morally gray everyone was, and there wasn't like a blindly good character, and there wasn't like an overall bad character. They both had mixed qualities. The ones that were considered the villains still had a little bit of redeeming qualities to them, at least some of them did. And then the main characters that we're supposed to be rooting for aren't technically good guys. They're kind of bad people. They do bad things. They're not bad people, but they do bad things. They're just very realistic in a sense that they are morally gray. With our main character, Raya, I don't know how you say her name. I'm gonna say Raya, but she really reminds me of Selena Sardathian from the Throne of Glass series. She acts so much like her. Like, it was like reading her as an adult. She's like this badass assassin that just always has these like funny, hilarious, like witty snapbacks, like comebacks that are just so funny. Like, you find yourself laughing even when it's supposed to be a serious scene just because she throws in little things in there and you just like bust out laughing. So think of like Selena Sardathian, right? But we also kind of have like that romance that, like, if you guys watch Arcane and you guys know who Vi and Caitlin are, if you like their romance, Raya and other character who is like she was a royal guard, her name's Evelyn, they have that like dynamic that like Vi and Caitlin do. I loved it. I ate it up. I ate up their love story is definitely very much slow burn, like to the point where like at the end they don't kiss nothing. Like, that's how slow burn it is, and I love that. We have a sapphic romance, but that's definitely not even close to being the main plot. The main plot is that this is a definite like high fantasy heist story that's so good. So I ended up giving this book 4 out of 5 stars. I didn't give it the final 5-star because towards the end it started becoming a little bit slow for me, but there was just like something that I felt like was missing at the end that I feel like, I don't know, it was just missing something. It was missing a little bit of the pizzazz that the rest of the story held. I just felt like it just became a little bit too predictable towards the end, I guess you could say. Like, over the course of the book, you're like at the edge of your seat wondering what's gonna happen next, but towards the end, you kind of like start to get a feel like, okay, this is what's gonna happen. You kind of already know. So there was that predictability that I felt like I wish we didn't have because I don't like being able to as easily predict things. Problem at the ending, but am I gonna keep reading the series? Definitely. I definitely want to check out the second book because I did like this like a lot. I did like this a lot, and I loved the characters. I loved everything about it other than the predictability towards the end. Everything else, there was just so much going for it. So if you're a fan of Pirates of the Caribbean, Throne of Glass, Arcane, you're probably gonna like, specifically like Caitlin and Vi and their romance. Not that there's like much romance to it. I'm acting as if there's so much romance to it, and there's not. There's no romance in it, really. Just like, if you like those like vibes, like, are they, aren't they? That's in there, you know? Don't expect smut and all this stuff. There's no smut at all. But if you want a fast-paced heist, witty banter, fun fantasy, badass MC assassin, then read this. Now we're gonna go ahead and get started with Hall of Smoke. I finished this we are done. I finished this. And I have to say I'm disappointed, honestly. Okay, so I was very close with what I thought this book was about. I thought this book was about this girl that like follows like Athena, and it was really close. So it is about a woman that follows her own goddess, and her goddess very much resembles sort of like Athena. Her name is Young, and she is the goddess of war, and she does have a owl that's sort of like her companion. And our main character, Hessa, we follow her in the very beginning as she is sort of exiled by her goddess because she does something she's not supposed to, and she's supposed to unalive this man, but instead she gives him like sanctuary, and because of that she's exiled, and as she's exiled, all of her people in her clan end up being unalived by these sort of like barbaric people. And so Hessa goes on this adventure to appease her goddess and appease her people and try to find that man so she could unalive him. But over the course of this adventure, she realizes that her goddess isn't all who she says she is, and there's a lot of like secrets behind all the gods, and there's a greater war that is sort of going on. And Hessa's just kind of thrown into the middle of it. So it did start off so promising. Like it kicked off with like sort of like a demon slayer sort of beginning, where we follow like Tanjiro, and we see that everyone in his town has been unalived other than his sister Nezuko, and it gave me that vibe. But after that, like 100 pages in, I want to say it started to just like really drag on in that pacing. It didn't keep up that fast pace that it had in the beginning, and it just sort of started to lose me more and more and more, and I ended up not caring for the characters as much as I had anticipated I would. I started to care for Hessa less and less and less. I started to care about the gods less and less and less, and what was happening. So towards like the last 100 pages, I ended up actually just getting the audiobook for it and just listening to it on audiobook, because I was getting ready to DNF. Like once I hit page 300, I was like, I don't know if I can do the last 100 pages. Like I just couldn't get myself to read it. It just caused this like reading slump. I'm going to say that this book is a 2.5 out of 5 stars. I am actually not going to be continuing the series at all. I just have no interest in it. I'm curious to what happens, but not enough to actually finish the series. So I'm probably just going to look up the summaries and stuff and find out what happens after this, because it wasn't what I was expecting, unfortunately. It had such a promising start, and then it just took a nosedive, and that sucks. So that is it, you guys. That is all the books. So if I had to rank them, this one was like, no. Then it was this one, and I'm glad I didn't read the Goodreads reviews, because I probably wouldn't have picked this one up otherwise, because it was like a 3.6, and I don't do 3.6s. I'm glad I didn't listen to that, because I loved this. And then it was this one. And then top of the food chain is the Three Body Problem, because this book was so good. Anyways, you guys, that is it. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed this like reading vlog. I am going to do so many more. I'm doing a Brandon Sanderson vlog that's coming out in February. I am doing a Court of Thorns and Roses reading vlog, and I have so many like trying out different authors to see if they're worth it and all that coming out this year as well. I'm just so excited for 2024 and what this reading year has in store for me. So anyways, you guys, thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed making this video. And yes, thank you guys so much. Please hit that subscribe button if you haven't yet. I post videos 2 to 3 times a week. And yeah, thank you guys so much for watching. Bye!